Welcome back to the Explainer. So, what if I told you that some of your absolute favorite creators should have, by all definitions of the law, actually gone to jail? I mean, we see the viral stunts, right? The millions of views, the laughs, the whole shebang. But behind the scenes, that line between a hit piece of content and terrifying hard time, it's literally razor thin. Today, we're breaking down those unbelievable moments where massive creators completely cross the line into serious criminal territory, but somehow, someway, manage to dodge the legal consequences of their craziest stunts.
Should your favorite creators be in jail? Honestly, when you see the actual laws they broke, it is a completely valid question. We're talking everything from breaking and entering, to rustling endangered species, to massive explosions and literal international incidents. These top creators came dangerously close to the justice system. So we're going to peel back the curtain and look at exactly how they managed to slip through the cracks.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We've got a really clear roadmap for you today. First, we'll look at the content versus the law. Then, instances when crime is an illusion. Third, escaping the jurisdiction. Fourth, accidents and self-defense. And finally, we will wrap it all up with the viral verdict.
All right, let's kick things off with our first act, when crime is an illusion. In these specific cases, the stunts looked highly illegal to pretty much everyone watching, and sometimes even to the people involved. But they were ultimately protected by a secret layer of consent. A perfect example of this starts with Mr. Beast and IShowSpeed. Now, this was presented as just a harmless prank arrest, right? Speed gets pulled over by police who claim he's got a warrant for skipping a court appearance. He's handcuffed, thrown into the back of a police car, dragged to a prison, and hazed by inmates, right? Until Mr. Beast pops out and says, "Welcome to my prison." But legally speaking, because Speed was taken by force and moved to another location, that could technically be considered kidnapping. And because Mr. Beast stopped him from leaving, well, that is false imprisonment. So why wasn't he charged? Context completely overrides content here. The two guys are friends, and that underlying layer of consent for a viral stunt is exactly what kept Mr. Beast out of handcuffs. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer cascade of potential charges Eric faced for his stunt. I mean, he literally broke into Mr. Beast's bedroom. He hid inside a giant Amazon package, had his friend dress up as a delivery driver, and completely lied to the security guard just to get the gate open. Once he was inside, he cuts himself out of the box, throws on a disguise, and just walks right into Mr. Beast's studio kitchen to eat company snacks. Entering the property, that's criminal trespass. Lying to the guard, that escalates it to trespass by fraud. And entering under false pretenses just to take company snacks, believe it or not, that can actually be treated as burglary. He survived this total legal minefield purely because the head of security had secretly given him permission to film the entire stunt. That secret permission was literally his get-out-of-jail-free card. And that brings us to Kai Cenat. You can just feel the raw, dramatic energy of his friends screaming, "I swear to my mother, it won't be no crib," right in the middle of a stream. They were sitting in front of this massive tower of fireworks inside what looked exactly like Kai's room. A friend brings in yet another firework, tosses it in the pile, and they literally start physically fighting over it because Kai knows just how dangerous this is. Mr. Beast, who was actually there, quickly bails, and the friend lights the fireworks anyway. The result? A massive explosion that completely destroys the room. Normally, setting off explosives inside a house is a fast track to reckless endangerment and potentially arson charges. But again, crime is an illusion here. The law viewed this as a controlled stunt because, plot twist, that room wasn't actually his house. It was a full-scale replica built specifically to be blown up.
That perfectly segues into our next section, escaping the jurisdiction. So, what happens when the crimes aren't an illusion? What happens when creators actually break the law, but use time and international borders to dodge prosecution?
While evading lawful authority is a pretty heavy legal concept where fleeing from a public official escalates a simple violation into resisting public authority. And this is exactly what went down with Nico Omalana in Chile. He wanted to see this protected penguin colony, but showed up right as the park was closing. So what does he do? He hatches a backup plan to fly a drone over the restricted area. Now in Chile, flying unauthorized drones over protected wildlife is super illegal. Almost immediately after launching, a park ranger comes charging straight for them. Nico and his friends completely panic, grab the drone, jump in their car, and just flee. By running from the ranger, Nico committed evasion of lawful authority, which, by the way, is punishable by up to 2 years in prison. He only escaped because he and his crew literally fled the country before the park authorities could even file a formal complaint. Which brings us to a genuinely terrifying moment in Japan with the Nelk Boys.
Can you please drop me off? Listen, that wasn't some scripted prank. That was genuine fear. The Nelk Boys used a local fixer to set up a meeting with a high-ranking leader of Japan's notorious Yakuza, an organized crime syndicate. And we aren't talking about some retired mobster here. This guy was an active fugitive wanted by Japanese authorities. The human drama was just intense as they drove to the meeting, seriously questioning if they should even go through with it. The contrast between their viral content and the actual legal reality was incredibly risky. On one hand, they sit down, interview the Yakuza leader, drink into the night, and chat with women from his entourage. Sounds like a crazy video, right? But on the other hand, the law views this as potentially harboring a fugitive. In Japan, simply interviewing a wanted person is usually fine, but by spending extended time with him in a social setting, they provided social cover, and that can totally be argued as criminal harboring or assistance. They only escaped charges because authorities likely figured it didn't quite cross the line into criminal harboring, and crucially, by the time the video actually went up, the Nelk Boys had already fled back to the United States.
22 million. That is the massive number of views the real Tarzan got when he filmed a wild video down in far North Queensland, Australia. He gets out of a boat, straight up dives onto a freshwater crocodile, and wrestles it as it thrashes around in the water, leaving his arm visibly bleeding. The Queensland Department of Environment came out and stated that interfering with a crocodile is a significant offense. Honestly, if local rangers had caught him in the act, he would have been arrested on the spot and deported. So how on earth did he get away with it? It's simply because pursuing international wildlife interference charges after the fact is just way too complicated, way too expensive, and it rarely results in a successful prosecution. Basically, he slipped right through a massive geographical loophole.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and look at our third acts: accidents and self-defense. In these scenarios, real disruption and severe physical harm actually occurred, but the creators were saved by a lack of criminal intent, or surprisingly enough, apathetic victims. The Australian group Misfit Minds faced a really clear-cut case of obstruction of business. They went and planted a fake speaker at a Hungry Jack's drive-thru. Whenever customers pulled up, the boys would yell at them through the intercom, telling them to turn their cars off, or just screaming stuff like, "Can you speak up?" They annoyed the customers so badly that people simply gave up and drove away without even ordering. But here's the catch. By causing customers to leave, they were actively preventing the business from making sales, which is the literal definition of obstruction of business. They risked massive fines, criminal records, and even jail time for what they thought was just a harmless prank. They were saved purely because they bolted after filming, and the restaurant management decided the prank just wasn't worth the headache of pursuing charges. But things get a whole lot darker when we look at criminal recklessness. That's a deliberate or reckless act causing serious harm without the intent to injure. Take David Dobrik. He rented a massive excavator out at a lake in Utah, attached a rope to the arm, and was spinning his friends around like a human carnival ride. When Jeff Wittick jumped on, David spun the machine way faster. Then he abruptly stopped the rotation, sending Jeff flying directly into the metal arm of the crane. The injuries were absolutely horrific: a fractured skull, severe eye damage, and multiple facial injuries that required years of surgeries. Jeff sued David for civil negligence for sure, but criminally? Prosecutors likely viewed this as a tragic accident that lacked deliberate intent. So even though his actions were highly reckless, they didn't quite cross that legal threshold into criminal recklessness, which ultimately saved David from a criminal conviction. Now, sometimes it's actually the victims themselves who save the creator. Tyler Oliveira traveled all the way to Paris to confront scammers operating near the Eiffel Tower. He confronted a pickpocket by spraying him with water mixed with, wait for it, fart spray. Well, the scammers reacted aggressively and a full-blown street fight erupted right there. In France, spraying someone with a chemical substance is straight-up assault, regardless of whether the victim is a criminal or not. But Tyler wasn't charged, and it's for two fascinating reasons. First, he claimed self-defense, and second, probably most importantly, the victims were illegal scammers themselves. They obviously didn't want to go to the French police because doing so would completely expose their own illegal pickpocketing operations. Talk about a crazy loophole.
Let's move to our final section and see how this all builds to our conclusion, the viral verdict.
And this brilliantly illustrates what we're ultimately looking at here: a sheer, wild variety of legal loopholes. You've got Mr. Beast dodging kidnapping charges through secret context, the Nelk Boys avoiding fugitive harboring by crossing international borders, David Dobrik escaping criminal recklessness because a horrific event was deemed a tragic accident without criminal intent, and Tyler Oliveira avoiding assault charges through a wild mix of self-defense against active criminals. It shows a truly fascinating landscape where our justice system is seriously struggling to categorize modern content creation.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought. As stunts get crazier and crazier just for clicks, will the law eventually catch up to the content? Right now, we're seeing creators slip through the cracks, using secret permissions, international flights, and these massive gray areas of intent. But as the stakes keep getting higher, you really have to wonder, how long is it going to take until the justice system stops seeing these as viral stunts and starts treating them as actual crime scenes? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.